Recording.
Welcome. So, what if luck was something that wasn't random, but something you can actually align to? Today, we're going to explore this topic, and my guest I have is Luke Bayley, who runs the International Academy of Astrology. And we're going to do a kind of interview, learn about what he does over there. It's also known as AstroCollege, and tools you can use to find your lucky times.
Huh.
So, I first thing is maybe tell us a little bit about the Astro College.
Thanks for having me. To have a chat today and go through things. I think it's a great opportunity. Just so that people know, basically about 12 months ago, I purchased the Astro College slash IAA from a lovely lady called Ina Stanley, who founded it, who's getting to the point where she wants to retire and a few things like that. But an amazing astrologer who has put 29 years, you could say, into building a college with what I would call one of the world's best curriculums, and it's being rewritten at the moment in some ways to include a lot more to do with traditional Western astrology, and we run programs over there where people can do what I call the natal studies course. Natal studies course. Basically, if you do that for, I would say it'll take you 2 to 2.5 years to go through. By that stage, you're a fully fledged astrologer. You'll know your stuff, but it doesn't mean you're professional. It's a bit like doing your apprenticeship or doing your college degree, or you become a GP in a medical practice, but now you want to go into specialization and become professional in a certain area. So then we also offer the professional studies modules. But what I did, taking this over from Ina, was try to differentiate a little bit between the IAA, which you introduced there to start with, the International Academy of Astrology, and it's pretty much, call it the university. It's the area where you go and get your actual qualifications that are known worldwide. And the Astro College, as such, I've separated that into a community-based astrology community where you've also got learning, but we will start doing more and more of self-learning. We've got an amazing library of probably, I don't know, I think there's 400 and something, I'd call them short courses slash seminars that are available now online for people to do. And also we will be sort of working to modernize the way in which we educate people. And through the Astro College, you'll be able to do some of the natal studies modules in a self-learning environment, which we're just in the process of getting together. But there will also be the ability to get into a community, get to know the teachers, get to know other people that are in there, and know that if you join that community, and it's free to join, that you've got access to some of the world's best astrologers. And you've also got people who don't know anything about astrology and they just want to come along and find out. So we do things like little Astro dice sessions, every second Friday. We get in there, and Barbie and Courtney hold these Astro dice sessions. And we do some chart delineation for free, and we do that sort of stuff. So that's what I'm doing. And I've been working pretty hard in the last 9 months to get that rebuilt. And so we're sort of running off two websites. But that's sort of where I'm at. But I got there after doing astrology for about now over 40 years, which I think you can ask me questions about that in a minute, and I'll tell you a bit more about the luck side.
Yeah, so I always like to ask fellow astrologers, was there a moment where beyond just being something interesting you were studying or exploring, it actually became real for you, like a specific transit
Yes,
moment?
absolutely. The I know now, but I didn't know at the time. The transit that got me into astrology was the same transit that got me to leave school when I was expected to continue and do all my studies and go on and go to university. And I went, no, nah, something got into my system. And I went, no, this isn't really for me. It's not going to work. And I look back at it now, and I've got a Sagittarius rising. And at the time when I left, literally, I think it was on the day that I left, Jupiter and Uranus were together conjunct right on my ascendant.
Mhm.
So the two rulers of astrology, Jupiter and Uranus, were sitting together in Sagittarius. And they're also the two planets, you could say, that represent absolute freedom. That's probably the best way to describe it. You want freedom. You don't want to do anything conventional. You basically want to be able to do whatever you like, however you like it. And I think that was the start of the astrology side for me. And that came from an interesting how would I put it? My study of astrology came from, doing some martial arts with a friend of mine, going to his place one day just to do a little, bit of a, you know, discuss philosophy, I suppose, plus also do some martial arts. And he had an astrology chart there. I said, "What's that?" And he told me, and I sort of looked at it, and I was sort of critical of it, didn't believe it worked. And Rob says to me, "Well, hang on, well, how do you know it doesn't work? Why don't you, have you ever had a chart done?" I went, "No." So my learning astrology started at that same point with, here's a blank chart. Here's some photocopies out of an ephemeris. It shows you the position of the planets. Here's a photocopy out of the table of houses, approximately where, my area is going to lie. We worked that out. And here's a book on how to do it. Knock yourself out. And that's how I learned astrology. I had to teach myself. But that was just the beginning. And then probably about 5 years after that, I discovered that, oh, hang on a minute, you can actually get taught, because back then there was no internet. You know, it wasn't like today, Molly, where people can jump on the internet and do a question, or people at the moment can jump into AI and think they're getting the chart done and get it completely wrong and think it's right. There's a lot of things that are sort of out there at the moment that are causing confusion. And that's part of the reason why I also bought the college, because I wanted to make sure that people are getting proper education, that people know what's right from wrong in those areas.
I think
I
that's
think, yeah, it's part and parcel of it. But yeah, so that was the moment, I would say. Astrologically, those planetary transits really, I look back and went, oh wow, look what happened. And I've got to say something else.
Mhm.
What prompted my leaving school was a series of events building up to that, which were not good. So I had, like, life forced me to make some changes. So sometimes, is it luck? I'm going to go down that path. Is it luck that I ended up falling into astrology when I did? People look at me now, or people looked at me when I was 21 and said, "Oh my God, I wish I knew what you knew." And these people were in their 40s. I wish I knew, and they were just getting into astrology. And they go, "God, I wish I knew what you knew when I was 21." Um, but I look at it and say, it wasn't something that was simple, it wasn't something that was easy. It was just something I had a major interest in and I wanted to know more about. But what happened to me prior was health issues.
Mm.
I had a series of events. I dislocated my shoulder playing some sport at a boarding school I was at. And then while I had that, someone picked on me and I got into a fight and I broke my hand on their head. So I had to get a pin put through my hand, which was not the most comfortable thing. Then while I've got all of that, I ended up with an ingrown toenail, which, and then I got sick. And then eventually I ended up leaving that boarding school and going back to live with my mother. And the main reason for that, because back then I was a celiac, and I still am, and no one knew how to feed you. So I was starving at school. That was the main reason I left. I went back home and then I started playing sport again. And then I got trodden on and ended up with a funny little pimple on my arm. And underneath my armpit turned out to be blood poisoning. And I had blood poisoning and abscesses, and I was as sick as anything. So my whole period of build up, is what I'm trying to say, during major study parts of my schooling, I'd gone from being the top of the class to dropping right away and staring down the barrel of having to redo the year again, because I really wasn't even present for a lot of the time. And I made the decision, no, this isn't right. It doesn't feel right. I'm leaving. I'm going to go get some money. I'm going to work. And it was that day that I had that Jupiter Uranus conjunction. So it's a bit like,
Mhm.
that Jupiter Uranus was bringing to the surface something that I couldn't see, because I was sitting in my 12th house till it hit my ascendant. And
Mm.
then, boom, out it came and released. And I was out of there. And guess what? Never had any health issues again after that for a long time. So it was like I had to make that change. And I really do believe that that was part of the process. Life creates issues sometimes in order to force you to change. And that was the whole thing. But
Absolutely. And a lot of astrologers, I feel, get into this study from, intense kind of trials or tribulations and wanting to understand it from a deeper level.
yeah,
And
can I ask you what got you into it?
I was studying psychology and philosophy in college undergrad, and I started finding a lot of text on like the connection of plants to planets. After college, I was working in research at a very top tier university, and I just was looking for something like less diagnostic and more holistic, and it really resonated with me as I was studying it. And I was on a healing journey of my physical body too, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, understanding the transits I was going through, understanding my predispositions in my natal chart to have that kind of issue. So yeah, it was kind of similar where it was going through pretty heavy transits and then started just more deeply studying it. I was always interested in it, and then I started meeting people who had professional astrologer books, and then I'd meet people who were professional astrologers when I moved to the West Coast, and I just fell in love with it and
Went
decided
from
that I
there.
wanted to be an
See, and
astrologer.
I don't know anybody who's not finding astrology through because something is going wrong in their life and they're looking for an answer.
Exactly.
Generally,
And
that's the
looking
case.
back, you can kind of map it. It is fascinating, because you don't, when you're younger, you're not studying astrology. But yeah, looking back on life events with this information and tool puts things into perspective.
Well, the funny thing is, it's not that long ago that schools did teach astrology,
Ab-
and when I say that, my ex mother-in-law, who's Greek, she grew up in a village in Greece, and I remember her telling me, she said, Luke, when I was at school, we used to learn about the planets and we used to learn about the astrology.
Of course,
So as a young child, and she's only in her 70s now. So it's not that long ago that sort of knowledge was actually still communicated and taught. And astrology was one of the most sought after university subjects going back to the Middle Ages and before. That's what
physicians
people did.
had to learn astrology before they could be a doctor.
That's right. And everyone, funny, everyone takes a Hippocratic oath when they become a doctor and forgets that Hippocrates was an astrologer. And
Yeah.
he said that you had to be versed in astrology and you needed to know the person before you could heal the person, was basically the philosophy around it.
Speaking of traditional uses of astrology, I mean, this concept of kairos, or the idea that time is not linear but actually qualitative, is, when you start studying traditional astrology, you realize the psychology aspect of it came much later. Originally, they were actually using astrology for timing and for nearly a lot of their planning activities in ancient times. It would be anything from coronations to medical procedures to
Absolutely.
foundation of a building to going, starting a battle to weddings. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was used in a very practical way, and it really is the measuring of time and understanding of time. So, the psychology aspect of it, as interesting and really accurate as it can be, I feel like people sometimes are surprised who don't know astrology that it's something we can use to locate auspicious windows for us, as well as understand when we're going through more trying periods.
Well, that sort of leads me into, did you want to have a bit of a talk about where I got into doing some stuff about predicting winnings? Would
Yep.
probably be the
Yeah, exactly.
And here's another stumble across moment. I will say it like that. Um, Initially, what I was doing, and you talk about you being a researcher, Molly, and for those who don't know, Molly and I have got not a very similar chart, but we've got similar components of our chart. She's very strongly Capricorn Sag, and I'm a Capricorn Sag myself. So we've got similar energetic components, and we've both got this major interest in research. So I started looking at and researching and wanting to know. So I'll give you a bit of background because it's important to understand why. Um, like I said, I was a self-taught astrologer at say 16, and by the time I was 20, 21, I started. I went and studied at the Chiron School of Astrology with Chris Turner, and got my professional qualifications and did my certificate courses and stuff like that. And but I'd already been doing astrology for 5 years, and during the time that I was learning from her, I started teaching for a first year class. So I knew my stuff pretty well, but why did I study again? Was because it filled in gaps. I mean, there's always gaps you can fill in. I look at the curriculum that we're teaching at the IAA, and I've got people I know, and I'm going back over and I'm editing some of the stuff in the recordings, and I still go, oh yeah, that's right, I remember that. Oh, well, that's a different name for the same thing. Classic example, there's something like what do they call them? They're not the navigator, they call it I call it the Lord of the chart. So I can't even remember what it is, but there's another name for it that we teach. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that was the same thing. So
The
people
helm,
have different,
the helm
what's
of
that? The helmsman. The
yeah.
helmsman. Yeah. So, but I always knew that as just the Lord of the chart. So different people have different things. And when you look at, say, you go to a Vedic astrologer and they talk about the Lagna, and the Lagna is the ascendant, you go, okay, well, unless you knew the term, you wouldn't know that's the same thing. So there's a lot of things that are, you're taught along the way. So I started to fill those gaps in. And probably by the time, and I say it like this, and don't take this the wrong way, but it's nearly this funny. I think at 16, I thought, God, this is so hard. I had no idea what's going on. By the time I got to 21, I've gone, wow, boy, do I know a lot about what's going on here in people's lives. I got to 25 and thought, I know nothing. You go through this period of going, hang on, what I thought I knew, there's more to it. This doesn't quite work that way. You get to 29 and you Saturn return and you go through and you're doing a reevaluation again. But I went through these stages of thinking I knew a fair bit, and other times where I feel like I had a lot more to learn, and so on. So during those times, I got to a point, probably in my mid-20s, and I went, there's something more to this. And I read a book by a guy called Peter Roberts, who was out of the UK, called The New Astrology. And it's probably one of the books that really influenced me the most, because it's not a typical astrology book. It's more about him researching how and why astrology works and running a theory about the energetic influences from basically the findings from everyone from, Michael Gorklin or whatever, however you pronounce his surname. I pronounce it Gorklin, but there's and so on, and all the research and studies that were done by a lot of people across the globe over many years, and he compiled it into a book. Now that made me think, yes, I agree, and he resonated with me for the first time. I thought, this person knows where I'm at. But I went, I need something to research. I need to know if the planets are physically having an effect on the outcome of events, whether they have a physical effect on us. We might not be able to measure it, but is it happening? And I hypothesized, and he hypothesized as well, and was very interested at the same time, that it was to do with neutrinos and subatomic particles that are being produced by, say, our sun and in the universe, and they're the smallest of particles. And now they were hypothesized about, I think, in the 1930s. There was evidence that they may exist in 1956, or they discovered that they did. And now we have DUNE, D-U-N-E, the Deep Underground Neutrino Experiment that's been built in the US, and it's doing a lot of research on neutrinos and how they work to discover, from a scientific point of view, how planets, I should say, how the universe was built and how, it all works together, etc. And I think there's a lot of scientific knowledge in that will, if they get to the point, and it's nearly, I feel like science is catching up to what astrology is based on and what it already knew. But science doesn't acknowledge that we have a spiritual self, that we have an energy field. They're sort of getting there, but they're not there yet. Unless you can touch it and feel it, it's not real. And what I wanted to know was, do the planets have a physical effect on us? This is really important. And I thought, well, I need to know if a planet in a certain position has more influence at that moment in time over what's going on than any other planet. So I needed to know something that was going to happen in advance. I needed to know where it was going to happen, what time it was going to happen, that was of short duration, that had an outcome. And I was thinking about it, the only thing I could find was a horse race. So I went, oh, okay. So I decided, let me just see if this works. And I looked at the horse racing, and what I did was I looked at who's going to win. The relationship should therefore be that the name of the horse, because that's what's going to go down in history. The winner should be associated to a planetary energy that's significant at that moment in time. If that's going to work, that's how it should work. And after I got 10 winners in a row, I thought I'd cracked the Da Vinci Code. I went, oh my God, I'm going to make a fortune. Right. And then I bet on the next one, like I bet along the way. little bits just to prove. My old thing was, I can't say, oh yeah, I did it without having my hat in the ring. You know what I mean? Like I have to put my hat in the ring, otherwise there's no point. And then the next one, loses outright. And I came about sixth. I'm like, what? Because mathematically and scientifically, you can't statistically get 10 winners in a row and following the same formula have one that just loses. There's got to be something else affecting it. There's there's got to be another influence I'm not seeing. And that set me on where I am today. I still haven't fully cracked it, but I've got a pretty good understanding. So I work with a gentleman called Robert out of New York who contacted me after I did a lecture on this in 2020, which is available actually on my IA website, on the astrocollege.com website.
I can link it.
Yeah, and so it's there, and I'm actually I've literally been asked, and I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to create a course on this, but in order to do this course, you really probably need to understand astrology a little bit better because you won't be able to work with it fully. There'll be certain circumstances if you're not a full-on astrologer that you could use on a day-to-day basis, and there's ways in which you can do it, and I'll probably include that as well. But I might make it as an actual course that people can do. There's no guarantees. I can't sort of say, hey, I'm going to guarantee you're going to win money, because then there's also another factor, and that is how lucky your own chart is. That can also play a role.
Mm-hmm.
And but these techniques particularly do work, and I'm just looking at how I go about that. So I'm probably going to advertise that and run it as a course as well, a short course. I don't know how long, 3-4 weeks. It depends how long. But why I want to do it is the last week of that course, I'll run just coming up to what we have here in Australia. We have the Melbourne Cup, which is the big horse race, and and that's on a Tuesday, the first Tuesday in November. And the first weekend in November is also the Breeders' Cup in the US. It's a big race. So we have two big, massive races on the same weekend or the same week. And I thought we'll try and finalize the last course, the last, class of that course, to let's see if we can pick the winner of both races. And we'll do a live demonstration of it. So what happened was I did this course, I did this seminar 5 years ago, got contacted by Robert afterwards saying, can you help me with a few things? And we decided, yes, okay, I can do that. And I started looking into it, and he wanted to try and pick a winner for every race. My philosophies on how this works, you really need to have the right timing, right planet, right spot, which means you sort of got to be patient and wait. So as a technique, yes, it works consistently, but it's not consistent if you're somebody who wants to win money off horse racing, because you might have to wait 6 months for the right time, right? So, but when you get there, it's going to be.
I see.
Yeah, you primarily, one of the major things is you need to have the planets moving across the top of the chart.
Why is that?
During the day, because your success point's always going to be the midheaven.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah. And if you think about it from a physical point of view, what I was looking for was to find out if a planet sitting directly above me at the moment of the race, did it have more influence over the winner than the others? And the answer to that in general sense is yes. But there are a lot of other factors that come into it. So, for example, if they're in a stellium, no, because the energies are too blended.
Yeah, hard to differentiate.
That's why sometimes you have to wait. Big planetary patterns in the sky at the time might be interfering with one planet's energy, working out and standing out over the others. There's a lot of things. So this is why it's not easy to just do it and use it to predict all the time. In some instances, you may be better off using a horary, except with a horary chart, that's probably better to use for, say, a game where there's two competitors. You might have a soccer game and you want to know who's going to win.
Mm-hmm.
So the horary might, because you've got two sides and it's set up, who's the home team and who's the opponent. Yeah. So, and you can work it that way, and that often works really well. So, but with the horse racing is different. There could be 24 horses in a race. It's not going to be simple to pick with a horary chart or even the charts of the horses. So you're not going to do too well with that. But so therefore I use the other technique. And these are things that that's what I'll be sort of teaching. and explaining how that works. But as I said, 10 winners in a row to start with, I actually thought I'd cracked it. And then since then, it's been an ongoing journey.
Ongoing
My
race.
point with Robert is that he said to me, can we start trying to pick, 6 in a row, get a pick 6? Boy, has that been a tough ask. So you're trying to pick 6 winners in a row with just the race times and where the planets are. And we tend to do that on the big race days because they've got big pools. And I thought, well, I've got a better chance of doing that than I have of winning lotto, where I'm just literally just random numbers, because at least I'm using my philosophies. And Robert and I have come pretty close. We have to get 6 in a row, but we've had like 4 winners in 2 seconds. And the problem with that, there's no cigar. So you invest your money, but if you don't get it, you don't win. But if we did, it'd be, in the vicinity of at least several hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of dollars. So it's worth giving it a go, but we still haven't cracked it yet. We haven't cracked the code. There could be other things that are going on there. So anyway, that's sort of where we got.
How did you transition from the horse race? Because I imagine those techniques would be different from choosing a lucky time to try your hand at the slots.
Yes, totally. So how would I put it? That's a different technique altogether, but I bore that out of me having to try and find times of the day where what's going to be the biggest influence and what's going to win, when I was trying to do race after race after race. That sort of came as a secondary. I'm still doing a little bit of research, and I want to go and do some research on other people who've done a similar study and find out a bit more. There's some gaps being filled. You sent me a video the other day from Simon, and he was talking about lucky times of the day. I even tested that last night, and it didn't work for me. So that was only one, but I'm actually going. But what he was pointing out made sense to me. Now let me explain one thing. Without going into too much detail, I was looking for things where the moon is often the trigger in positive signs for your own chart, and also planets that are approaching aspect, not separating. So once the aspect's been formed, the luck tends to run out, disappear. So the real key to slot machines or gambling of any kind like that is to know when to bet and know when to walk away. So you've got a sort of a limited window. And I've tested that, and I'm going to put this into my course. But I remember, so I'll give you the example of an aspect. I had Jupiter. This is going back last year sometime. Jupiter conjunct my north node, which was a pretty strong position. But my north node also completely squares my midheaven. So they're both at 15 degrees of Taurus, or Taurus and Leo. And what happened there is I had Venus in Leo coming up to square the Jupiter and conjunct the midheaven. So I went, this is going to be a favorable time for me. Now, the funniest thing is, when that Venus sat on my midheaven in Leo, where did I go? I went to a ball. So, a lovely ball, a dance, which is exactly out there in the public. The funny thing about that ball, it was actually the haunted ball. It was at Monte Cristo Homestead and so probably the last one they did. And so I was in Junee in New South Wales and invited to go to that, and attended the ball. And afterwards, I was heading to Sydney. And I said to my partner, Lydia, I said, look, this is a good time for me to bet, just in general. And because I had this Venus-Jupiter transit, but I was also hitting some major aspects.
Were there
Interesting.
any other transits? Because usually it's like a rule of three. I usually approach when I make a prediction or look for.
Yeah. In this case, I was testing, right? And the other thing is what Simon's talking about is aspects, especially major aspects to the nodal positions. Now, don't forget, Jupiter was sitting on my north node and then getting triggered by the Venus. Now, what's important about that is that Venus is the ruler of that node. Venus natally in my chart is in the second house of money, and Jupiter rules my second house of money. So we had the rulers of those all being in aspect together in a strong prominent position. Now, what happened was this: I couldn't do anything wrong for a couple of days. So I went the next night down to the local pub in Junee with a couple of psychic ladies we know and a few other people and relatives of Lawrence who ran the ghost tours at the place and also did the ball. We went down there and had dinner. And I said, look, I'm just going to go into the slot machine room, the pokey room, as we call it here in Australia. And then Janet, who was one of the psychics there, says, can I come and just watch? And I said, yeah. So I went in, I went around, put some money in, and went, nah, not this one. Went to another one, nah. I came back to the original one I chose. And she said, I think I might do that. I played it for 5 minutes and I won the major jackpot. Got $1,000 out of it. I went, great. So I went and shouted some drinks, came back and then left. And then next, I said to Lydia, I said, this is building. Venus is getting closer to exact. I said, tomorrow, because we're going to Sydney, we're going to the casino. And we tested it. We went in there and I can tell you at that point in time, I couldn't do anything wrong. I walked in, put some money into a roulette table, picked the numbers, and after 4 spins, I'd had 3 numbers, and I was already up $700 from a $5 bet. And everything she's putting in, she's losing, and everything I'm putting in, I'm winning. We go to the poker machines, the slot machines. I started, and it takes forever to sometimes get a major jackpot. Sometimes I won 5 of them that night. 5, one after the other.
How much was the grand total?
About 6,500.
That's pretty remarkable.
So what I then did, this is what I had to do, and I can't ring you and say, hi, Molly, by the way, I'm testing out how the slot machines work, and I'm just doing the timing. Here's your day I've picked for you. Can you go down and put like $500 through the slot machines? And if you win, great. And if you don't, let me know.
Of course.
You're going to go, no way, right? And the problem with what I'm having to do in my testing is it has to be subjective because no one else would do it. No one else would just rely on that and sort of, oh, well, I can throw the money away. It's not a problem. But I've had to go, I need to be able to win and lose to know when it's working. So that's what I literally have been doing. But I'm way ahead, I can say. I've got to say I'm way ahead. I haven't lost. But there are times when I lose and I have to go, no, it's time to walk away. Like last night I went up and I gave myself a time slot and I was working it off aspects to the moving part of fortune, which is what Simon's talking about. And I watched that come past and I went and did it. But I just know from a feeling, an intuitive feeling, this isn't working. This isn't going to pay me. I got a little bit back, but overall I walked out $100 down. But I gave myself a limit of spending, say, $150, $200 at worst. But I went, no, and I got a little bit of a win back and I went, no, I'm leaving. I'll come back on the 25th of July. This will be interesting. I'll come back and let you know what happens on the 25th of July because I have bigger aspects and a better position for me personally, but it doesn't involve Venus. And I think Venus sometimes is what I need from a monetary point of view because it's in my second house natally. Yeah. But what is aspecting is the sun, and the sun is also in my second house natally. So I'm going to give that a go and see how it works. But I've already got my time, 4:55 in the afternoon. I know where I'm going to be for that 10 minutes, and I'll see what happens.
You have been able to identify some consistent transits that result in, for you at least, winning.
Generally speaking, yes. I think for me, it is a fruitful moon position. So when the moon is, and I think it really comes down to the ruler of my second house and what's natally in my second house. So I have Jupiter ruling the second house, and that's the same whether it's a Vedic chart or whether it is a Western chart. And in both Vedic and Western, I've got the Sun and Venus in the second house. So therefore, anything to do Sag, Jupiter, or Leo, and my ruling planet Leo of my chart is Jupiter, and it is in Leo, natally in the 9th house. So I tend to find that those. So what I tend to find is that if the moon's in Taurus, early degrees of Taurus, the moon is in early degrees of Leo because it's also going to conjunct my Jupiter at the time. And also if they're probably the main ones. What's another moon sign that it's happened? Believe it or not, Scorpio is, for me, moon in Scorpio can be great or really bad and nothing in between. And I will give you an example of that now. Lydia and I went up to the same place and I said, look, we've got to go and bet at this time, and I didn't know this, and I was learning a little bit more from Simon stuff, but I noticed something very interesting. Working on that moon, don't forget, Jupiter was in Taurus. While it was in Taurus, this worked for me a lot better. So when Jupiter was in Taurus, because it was in a Venus-ruled sign, and I had it in a Venus-ruled sign, and therefore it was the ruler of my second house was in a sign ruled by the planet natally in my second house. During that 12 months of Venus in Taurus, it worked very well for me. I didn't seem to have a problem winning money. When it moved into Gemini, it all started to change. It went downhill very quickly. So there's another scenario. So there's a number of things I can consistently look at, and I'm still monitoring. It's now moved into Cancer, which is in my 8th house. I'm yet to determine how well that works, because the 8th house can also be debts or other people. In other words, good old the poker machine's collecting from me, not the other way around. Or it could be that I collect from it and bring it into my. So I've got to try and line up the aspects so that it's bringing it to me, not the other way around, and do it at those times of the day.
How about
That's a whole other.
Oh, sorry, you can finish.
Okay, going.
I was just gonna say, how about the part of fortune? Have you been tracking transits to that?
Well, this is what I'm about to tell you.
Okay.
It's not so much transits to it. I'm actually doing that at the moment, because when I said the 25th of January, or July, I should say, that's when Jupiter is conjunct my part of fortune exact. But on that day, I also have the transiting sun conjunct my Jupiter.
Okay.
So that's why. And then I'm going to pick the time when the part of fortune is conjunct Pluto. And I'm going to explain why.
The transiting part of fortune. Okay.
The transiting part of fortune. Now, I'll explain to you why. And look, this may not work, but I'm going to give it a go and I'll let you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a philosophy. But what's happened is what I was about to say. Last year, when we had the transiting moon Jupiter, so the moon had gone into Taurus and Jupiter was in Taurus, and it was fairly early degrees, and it was about 7 degrees. So the moon was going to go past. And during that period, I thought this is a good time to at least give it a go. And I'd said to Lydia, we're going to go up to the hotel, and we need to be bedding between 9:30 and 10:30 at night. And it's around that time, because after that the moon will move and things will change. Unbeknownst to me about the part of fortune. Okay. So we were there, and I sort of went in, and it didn't really sort of go very well. So I'm going to just wait for a little bit. I wait for my feeling. I also go on a bit on intuition. And I went, okay, I feel a bit more comfortable. I went in, put some money into a machine, and it started to win. But it sort of had a limit. It went up to $600, and it wouldn't keep going. And I thought, I wonder if it's going to keep going. I thought, no, I'm going to pull it out of here. So I pulled it out, and one of the young guys working there at the time, had sort of said, oh, that machine, it's fun. He walked past with a random comment. So that machine's funny. It sometimes gets to a limit, and you sort of got to pull the money out, and then someone puts the money back in, and then all of a sudden they win again, right? And he'd made that comment to Lydia, but not to me, just sort of randomly as just a bit of a, just saying it. And she kept that in her mind. And so I pulled it out, and it was $600. I said, go get the money. And because we're still within the time frame. And she came back and she said, are you going to play that machine again? And I went, no, I'm done with it. I'm going to go play this one over here, see how we go. She goes, no, but remember what, so-and-so just said. And I went, look, I'll tell you what, do you want to? Here's $50. You go put it in. She goes, well, can you set me up? I went, all right. So I went over there, put it in. Bet 10 cents by 25, so $2.50 a bet. First spin, she presses the button. First spin, she gets the games. Wins the grand jackpot for $9,000.
Did you pull the transits?
Yeah. But what I'm saying, I'd already done the transits, and I went, we're going to win between this time, and we did. But you know what was interesting? At that moment, transiting part of fortune was conjunct Pluto.
And just for viewers who might not be familiar, the part of fortune moves rather quickly. You have
Very
like
quickly.
a small window, maybe
3 minutes.
Oh, 3 minutes. Yeah.
Realistically, if you want it exact, it's about 3 minutes. And knowing what I know, it would be the build-up rather than the past.
Not separate.
Yeah, the applying rather than the other. But that said, so that's why I say 3 to 5 minutes maximum as it's coming in. And then afterwards, you might get a minute or so later, and then you walk away. And that's what happened last night. Like, I was losing, and I was applying, and it was basically applying to my Jupiter what I was looking for to see if it was going to do. because Jupiter's sitting close to my part of fortune at the moment. I thought I'd see if the combination will work. And I was literally kept running the chart, timing, measuring it, see what was going to happen. And just as it got really close, I won a bit. I got a games and I won some money back, but I was still $100 down. And then I looked again and it had passed. And I went, you know what? That's my
No,
limit.
no one to hold them, no one to fold them.
Fold them. Exactly.
That's
And I
half
think
the
that's what
battle.
it is. It is the biggest battle for someone who gambles. Um, and as I said, I wasn't doing this to gamble, but I have paid for a kitchen renovation with cash
From winning.
last year from winnings. Absolutely. Well, there's 9 grand to start with. There's other ones that have done. I mean,
At that
there
point,
was
I
an
think any reasonable person would be like, okay, that's good for
that's
today.
good. Absolutely. So I can't, Lydia's got this little bag and she keeps it in a bag. It's like a pencil case.
Hmm.
And it's got, how you've got your eye in the background on the wall? Made me think of it. And it's got that same eye on there, and it's got written across the top, keep your eyes on the prize. And what I used to do was I'd win the money and I'd stick it in her little bag, and she'd be running around with $5,000 cash in the bag, and then we'd take it out and spend it on obviously pay someone or do whatever we had to do. But we got through stuff during that period. Now that was, as I said, with Jupiter in Taurus. That's another 12 years away to come back.
Yeah, and so that you were in a nice kind of
But
longer transit to then
I was in a bubble.
the
Yeah, I
more
was in a
you
good
can
bubble.
stack, I would say, auspicious
Yeah.
transits, the better your odds are. Yeah.
So the other thing is, I can talk, say, her brother, who's also got Venus in the second house, but his Venus in the second house is late degrees of Aquarius,
Mhm.
whereas mine's in Capricorn. It doesn't really matter what I'm saying. It's in late degrees of Aquarius in the second house. And I remember going to dinner with Danny. We were all out together. Some of her family. She's got a big family, and he was going, mate, when's the best time to do the betting? And I said, oh, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, you don't want to do it with the moon sort of void of course, late degrees of Aquarius, forgetting, not checking out his chart, that's where his Venus was,
Ah,
and in the second house, right? So typical of Danny, he's only going to half listen to me anyway, and he gets up from the table. I said, give it about an hour or two because the moon. Let's wait for the moon to move into Pisces, and then it's going to be a little bit more fruitful. It's Jupiter ruled, blah blah blah. So I'm just thinking out loud, but I'm giving him advice, and he runs off, and goes out for. I think he's a smoker, so he ran out for a cigarette, and he disappears from the table, comes back in a little while, and I said, "So, are you been outside?" He said, "No, went into the pokies. I won some money." I went, "Oh, you already went?" And he goes, "Yeah." I went, "Oh, okay." And then I looked at his chart, and I went, "Oh my God, the moon's sitting right on his Venus in the second house."
oh,
So I went, "Oh, maybe it's your lucky night, Dan." So it was one of those nights where we went in and I tested it. I put money in, didn't matter what I put in, I was losing because Aquarian moon just not work for me. Just doesn't sit in the right spot. Him, to the point where I don't know if you have it in the US, but here in Australia, it's not often now anymore that you've got slot machines that you don't put notes in, that you can still put coins in, right? And he'd been winning. He'd probably won, $1,500. He just kept winning. And he sits there and he pulls out, a couple of like three $1 coins. And we're about to leave. And he goes, "Oh, I'll give this one a go." And he puts a coin in and presses for $1 and gets the games and then wins another $400. And I'm like, so it was like, when it's on, it's on. You can't, but I've said to him, "Dan, you need to walk away. It's going to go now. It's passing."
hmm.
So, and so your timing you can work with. How to pick them exactly? I haven't got a table or anything worked out to give to people yet, but I can give these sorts of insights and explain what to look for and try to put it in a form so that you can create your own. That's what I intend to do with the course I want to do. And hopefully, therefore, people can win. And if they win real big, then they can sort of, I'll put it out there like a donation box and say, you can donate back to me if you give me the insights. We'll see how we go.
I
I'm
think
used to it.
the more research you file, the more you can kind of find the You
Absolutely.
need a lot of empirical research, and nothing in astrology is a law. All of it is essentially just backed theories, well-backed
It's
theory.
it's an ever-changing well, interestingly enough, I there's I say this with a sense of reservation. There is an element of fate. There's an element of that's why timing works. So to me, I have an interesting philosophy on life, and that is that some things are sort of fated, and some things are choice, and some things that create destiny points. So we have free will that, and I wanted to write a book, and I may do it down the track, and it's basically called Destiny Points,
Mhm.
and the subtitle of that is Where Free Will Interrupts Fate. So in other words, some things you're meant to do, but maybe you've got multiple paths you could do, like sliding doors. And sometimes when you've made a choice to do something, you can't go back and do it. You can't go back. It's now a forever choice. You're gone. It's changed. You know, a classic example of that, and it's a really horrible thing to say, is someone who regrets jumping off a cliff. It's too late to say to yourself halfway down, I really shouldn't have done that. You know, it's a really horrible thought, but that's what I mean by a destiny point. You've changed the course of your life. So to me, your life is here's my boundaries, right? That's my boundaries are basically the environment I'm born into. The more opportunity I have in my environment will depend on my environmental circumstances. If I'm born in a very, very poor country in Africa with no food, my environmental choices might be that big versus somebody who born in the United States might be this big. And within that, I've got fate. And fate is I'm born here, I'm going to die there. And if I live an optimum life, basically, I go through that line and I go to and this one here is time. And then from there, I've got this curve, the curve's down. And basically, anywhere in between there, I have choice. So I could have multiple fated existences based on the choices that I make. And pretty much that's how it works to me. And that's something that then goes into the whole quantum time stuff and living multiple existences at the same time, and that's that's another possibility as well. I'm not disputing any of that, but it's and that's where it becomes scientific mind-boggling stuff that people go, oh, hang on, I don't want to know.
TMI. Those are some TMI.
Bit
What
much, please leave me alone.
to in the context of lucky times and betting and gambling, to me is the idea that certain natal charts, perhaps even if they're striking on their lucky time, might not have the natal promise to have big winnings through speculative betting based on the way their natal chart is. Would you say
Yeah,
that?
I agree. And some people, I mean, some people make a career out of winning things. Have you ever heard of those people where
I'm gonna do a
they
case.
just
Maybe I'll do a case study on that. That would be a very good case study. Like
yeah.
to
I
compile
don't
a
know.
bunch of their charts.
I don't know somebody particular, but I've heard of people, and I know people who know people that have sort of like, I don't know if you have things like art union lotteries, and what that means is they have a lottery to raise money for a charity, and all these tickets are sold, and if you win, you get a brand new house and a car and some gold bullion, and you win all this stuff. There's some people that I know, someone I knew whose friend won it 3 times. So
Yeah,
I love that
that's beyond
card.
beyond luck at that point.
Yeah, it's like how does one person win the same thing 3 times? But in that, they might also be the same person who enters competitions and keeps winning as well. It's like the chart has a component of luck that brings it around for things to fall for them, right? Um, that's a rarity. I don't see that as something that most people go, I know, I definitely don't have that. I feel like I have the anti Midas touch at times, where you touch it and it's going to go the other way. If I pick left, I should have gone right. If I pick right, I should have gone left. It's like, okay, let my intuition work it out. Okay, left or right, left or right. Oh, I get left. Okay, I better go right then.
You feel like there are certain natal chart placements that predispose one to being luckier at things like investing, gambling, these more speculative gains.
Yeah, well, those sorts of things, I think It varies. It's like, to me, that's a lot of the fifth, second, eighth house, and even the 11th house, all those houses combinations. But then it depends on the planetary rulers of them, depends on the nature of those planetary rulers. Because even if you've got a ruler that may be considered negative in some ways, it may bring a lot if it's
Well,
in
that's
a powerful position and it's nicely set up in the actual chart. So I mean, I've had times in my life where I've gone through a lot of hardship, a lot of hardship, and out of that hardship was born some advantage. But with the advantage often comes disadvantage in different ways. But sometimes the bringer of that advantage has been something like Saturn. It hasn't been Jupiter. But that's been a time endured problem. And then it brings a benefit, because I think Saturn brings benefits once you've learnt lessons. So
once you've paid
Saturn will
your
continue,
dues, he's like, okay.
yeah, once you've
Take
mastered
it.
certain things. But in order to master things, unfortunately, that's why Saturn is the Lord of time. You often need time to have these things evolve, to understand, to really truly go, have those aha moments. They come over time and experience, and usually, unfortunately, through some level of pain. Because, I call it thumbtack on the seat principle, and that is, you give a person love, food, and shelter, they ain't moving anywhere. But if you put a thumbtack on their seat, they get up pretty quick, right? Why? Because they feel pain.
I like that. And to
So,
speak to what we talked about in the beginning, a lot of the times it's those trials that actually get people to trying to figure out how to get through them, or when these windows for opportunities or breakthroughs might take place. And Simon, the person, the Vedic astrologer we were referencing, he talks about how he has a particularly unlucky chart in some
oh,
respects. And he started studying a lot of this stuff, and he wrote the book Gambler's Dharma, which gets into betting on wins of races. But then he talks about, using astrology for slots, which is a very unforgiving way to actually test it, because there's no skill involved in a slot machine. And so it's interesting, because then that's how he kind of got into this whole area of study. Like,
yeah,
he had a certain level of disfortune, I don't know what the word is, but then using astrology to try to then essentially like amplify the lucky time.
positive signs. Yeah,
Exactly.
increase your positive percentages, you could say. So if you've got a certain time frame, that this is more likely that it's going to work for me rather than against me. But one of the things he talks about is that sometimes the luck, that may be in a particular planet based, and they talk about, your dasha lord. So you're going through dasha periods, and what the lord of that is, that also has a major influence over, and its position in the chart at the time, which may not show up in your natal chart, because your natal chart, it might have a totally different, it might even have a negative influence. But once it's your dasha period, it tends to work, or it's working. So if you work with that dasha lord during those periods where it's positive, then it should work for you. That's the theory of what I'm seeing from what he's saying. And I haven't tested that, but from what I see, it makes sense, because look at what I said when I went to the casino and I knew that I had that Jupiter Venus. You have to wait for a long time for that to come back around and be at that same point. And is it even going to form that same point again? And how many years ahead is that?
Right.
So identifying these and understanding them, they're important for me to find that out, so I can pass that on to other people, and hopefully they can work those timings out. But I got to say, yeah, did I win? Yeah. Did I look like I was going to lose? No. What I didn't mention though is I went back the next night, and I went back to the casino, and I said to Lydia, so I'm going to go back. I've still got it within orb. So Venus had moved past. It was now a separating aspect, not applying. And do you think I could win? No. Even though the aspect was still within orb? No. So I gave it a red hot go. I stayed there for 5 or 6 hours, and I thought, look, it may still just hit. And it didn't. So I went from a $6,500 win down to about a $4,500 win. So I blew another $2,000,
Mm.
but I did it to experiment. I didn't lose it all in one go. I mean, it was over 6 hours. So I was winning, losing, winning, but I was gradually going down. The day before, I was going, whoosh, up, and that was it. So, totally different scenario.
I'm not much of a gambler myself, but I recalled I've been interested in this because I work with people and understanding windows for businesses and making money and using astrology practically. But I was, interested in Simon's work because he talks about your lucky hour of the day, which has to do
Yeah.
with something called the yogi point, which is similar
Yeah.
to the Western part of fortune, but it's calculated from the sun, moon added together, those degrees added together. And if it's over 360 degrees, you subtract, to get it to
So, are you saying the yogi point is just your sun and moon added together by degree?
Mhm.
Okay.
But you in the sidereal, right? It's not something I would just stick to that system. I don't mix the systems in that way. But anyway, he also had mentioned, so the moon transiting that point. And what's interesting is retrospectively, I was like, I'm gonna take a look at the time I went into the slots many years ago, maybe 8 years ago, and won within 3 minutes. What was going on?
Yep.
Sure enough, the moon, and this is again a really small percentage of the day, right? The moon was transiting my yogi point, and I actually can pull it up. I can see how close it was. Yeah, it was approaching. So it was at 5 degrees, and my yogi point's at 8 degrees Sag. So it
So,
was.
for those people who don't know, can you explain how you calculate your yogi point? So, as in for you in
I
your
would
chart.
say I'm just going to give the cheat sheet because I think it's simpler for people who are just learning astrology. Go to
Okay.
Astro charts, or sorry, I think it's AstroCollege. It's just type in seek and go to the sidereal chart calculator and put your birth time in there and make sure it's the sidereal chart calculator. You can scroll down and it'll tell you your yogi point, but that's in the sidereal zodiac. So you're going to have to convert it into the Western I just use sidereal zodiac to keep it simple. Other
Yeah.
striking thing though about that particular win was not only was the moon approaching the yogi point by 3 degrees, but the transiting part of fortune was conjoining my ascendant. So two of the tips he had used in identifying lucky times of day were active,
Yeah.
in
At the same time.
2014 when I won this $600 within a minute of going into it was the first time I've ever gone to a slot machine. We went for fun because the casino had just opened in
Open.
Philadelphia. And we went in there because it was just a spur of the moment, kind of like, oh, they were giving away a certain amount of credits to use. But I thought it was interesting that, wow, both two aspects he was talking about, windows within
Were
it,
happening at the time.
were happening. And then I had a recent lucky win at a local raffle on Kauai where I won the grand prize. And I had, in that instance, let's see, transiting Venus was conjoining my part of fortune in my second house, which is resources. And that's a once a year transit. So
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting, right? Then to look and be like, okay, retrospectively, I wasn't really consciously paying attention. And transiting part of fortune during that time was transiting my fifth house. And Mars was in my fifth
Yeah.
house of speculative gains. So
Yeah.
retrospectively, it's like, okay, I'm definitely noticing certain things seem to be true.
Hmm.
So I guess what is the next kind of lucky? I think you had mentioned in one of our kind of your points what the next lucky kind of window you're looking forward to by transit is.
For me, I'm going to test next is the 25th of July for me. Um, Everyone will have their own thing they have to look at in their own charts primarily.
Mhm. I'm
I
asking
haven't even
you, I'm just
I
curious.
haven't even calculated my yogi point yet. I'll have to do that. So it'll be interesting to work out what that is. Actually, I'll try and work it out
Where are Jupiter and Venus though transiting your chart right now?
right now. Jupiter is in my
Or in
eighth house.
the next window that you're looking forward to?
Oh, Jupiter will be conjunct my part of fortune.
In which
That's
house?
what in the eighth.
Okay. Do you have fifth house planets?
Yes, Saturn. You don't laugh at my fifth house planet.
In which?
Saturn and Chiron. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So not the greatest for luck, but at
Fine,
the end of the
Saturn.
day, yeah. But it works okay. It's just I've got to work with what I've got. So I've got this dichotomy, lovely Venus and the Sun in the second house, which brings me, and Saturn wants to stop me getting it. So yeah, it's a bit like that.
Which sign?
I'm my Saturn's in Pisces.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be a more
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So it's not it's Jupiter ruled, and also Neptune ruled. So if you look at it from a traditional astrology point of view, you go, okay, well that's Jupiter ruled in the ninth house. My Jupiter's in the ninth house in Leo. But if I go back to a sidereal chart, my Jupiter is in Cancer, which is exalted. So they vary, but it is retrograde, so that has another effect. So there's a whole heap of things that you have to take into consideration.
Yeah, of course.
But for me, I'm going to test a little bit more of Simon's theories, and I'm going to work with the part of fortune and see how much impact that has. Because I know what I do at the moment. The interesting thing about testing it on the 25th for me will be I won't know the difference between whether it is Jupiter on my part of fortune if I win, or whether it is the Sun conjunct my Jupiter on the day that I win. So, or whether it be a
We never
combination of
can
both.
really parse it out. And I think that's one of the reasons why astrology isn't really accepted by a lot of scientists is because there are so many layers and it's a very
And
complex
variables. Yes.
matrix. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would say it can't hurt to, if you're in a grander cycle of luck, to then within a given day or a given approaching aspect to just add in, the moon going around
Absolutely.
or the
Yes.
part of fortune going around to your yogi point, for instance.
If you're looking at slot machines and other things that are sort of timing of a day, you know, um, even down to probably when am I going to buy my lotto ticket?
Hmm.
These sorts of little windows of time could only work in your favor. As Simon would say, if it increases your percentage by 20%, would you be better off doing it then and still losing, or doing it whenever you want and still losing? If you can increase your percentage chances that little bit more, is that going to be a favor? And the answer to that is, to me, is yes, it would. So utilizing these timings, I think, is an important component. But being able to know what's what, how and where, and making it easy for people, that's what I'm working on. I think he's been working on too. So
Yes, absolutely.
um, we will get there. I haven't reached out to Simon, but I probably will at some stage. I'll reach out to him and sort of say, would you like to work on this one together? Because he comes from a different astrological background.
A transit is a transit, as I like to say, so it kind of is irrelevant what zodiac you're using because the transit
Exactly. That's right. Yeah.
is universal.
100%.
And unfortunately, I can't bet here. Like, there's no, I can't get a scratch ticket. I can't, because I do have some lucky Jupiter going into my fifth house soon. And so, yeah, sadly, I can't go buy like a scratch off game or go to a casino.
Is that a Kauai thing?
That's a Hawaii thing. They make it kind of hard. So I might have to go to the mainland to do some of my own research and development.
Oh, so there's no, is gambling itself banned in Hawaii or some kind?
Yeah, they just don't have like a state lotto. They don't have yeah, they
Do they
don't.
have slot machines?
Nope. That's why a
Oh,
lot of Hawaiians love going, their favorite mainland city to go to is Vegas.
yeah. Well, Vegas is another story for me, and I've only ever been there once, and it was probably one of the worst experiences I've ever had. It was a bit like I made my own version of The Hangover before The Hangover was actually a movie. I had an experience like that. So, and then I looked later and said, where my relocation is, what's going on in my chart
Oh my
if I
gosh.
go to Vegas and I have Neptune conjunct the midheaven?
Oh, not a good place to gamble for you. There's luckily you can gamble a lot of places. Oh, I don't know if I asked you this question, but maybe you did answer it, and apologies if you did, but you've studied astrology, you've been on a long journey with it. So when did it dawn on you that you could use it for luck?
Basically, when I was trying to find out whether, like I said before, when I was trying to find out whether the planets had a physical effect on us, and the
Uh,
only thing I could use was a horse race.
right, right,
And
right.
then I realized that after I'd picked 10 winners in a row, I've gone, oh my God, this works. Because
And
technically, that's right. You
yeah,
can't get 10 winners in a row. Mathematically
it's above
and
chance.
statistically, it's way above chance. So I think it worked out it's like 4 million to one, right, to do that. And something like that anyway. And but then to lose following the same principles, I went, why? Because you shouldn't lose either if you're working at that level and it's been that obvious. But to me, it was a bit like life went, here's your carrot. I'm going to give you a little bit to show you this works. Here's your task to go and work it out because you need to find out. But I'm not going to give you any money.
They say if you have enough astrology, if you know enough astrology, like many people who are studying it and maybe not going into a program with it know enough to be dangerous. And that kind of
Yes,
gets to the point where there is more of a rigorous process that needs to go into like making a conclusion or deciding something's a theory. When you're looking at something that is so objective, like a race or a machine or a table, it is a good way to test astrology because many people, many skeptics will say, "Oh, astrology just works because, people get projected on that's their personality and they take on the role because they read about it and you're actually altering your reality by studying this and putting yourself in that framework or mindset." But with gambling, your placebo effect on a slot machine is not going to work. Because I think
yeah,
Simon pointed this out. It's actually designed for you to lose. So it's
exactly.
unforgiving. So it's a really
No,
great way to test without
yeah.
having that
One
bias.
of the things that I've noticed as well is that, and this is how it works, I suppose, from a horse racing point of view. Sometimes you look at, because don't forget that's also designed for you to lose money, and they
Mm,
only give you a certain amount of money based on the pools, as in what's left in it. So a classic example of this is depending on where you live and how that works. So when we say, if we talk about the Breeders' Cup, a big race in the US, the people betting on that in the US is a huge number of people. So what happens is that the pools are bigger. The money that they can give back for the winnings is bigger. And it's dependent on that, depending on what odds people will get. And in Australia, we have much smaller pools. So one of the things when I'm doing that with Robert, for instance, I send him money because it'd be better for me to win in the US and pay tax and then transfer the money back to me over here as a winning. I'd make more than if I bought it in Australia because, for example, there was a winner a few years ago of the Breeders' Cup called Mage. I think it was the Breeders' Cup. I don't think it was Kentucky Derby. And Mage stood for, like a magician, I suppose. Here in Australia, it paid $11 for a win. And in the US, it paid something like $33, $34 for a win. So it's 3 times the amount for the same bet. And in US dollars, with my Aussie pesos, that works out a lot more in Australian dollars. So for the same amount of money I'd be spending, I'd win a hell of a lot more if it was in the US. But technically, I can't bet over there. So I need somebody who works with me to do it. And if we do win, then we'll worry about how we get the money back to me.
right.
So ultimately, it might be the same with you. You might need somebody that you trust in the US that can do your
Well,
gambling
that
for you.
brings an interesting point because are you really doing it if you're having a friend buy the physical ticket? Because then aren't you getting their karma and fate involved?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I would
Yeah.
argue then you're not even working.
I'm 100% with you on that, and that's a whole other level. But if you're working if you're working in a consortium with horse racing, I think might be a little different.
Mhm.
But I do agree. And there's this other element I'm not sure of, and that is how much of your capacity to win depends on the individual's capacity to win on that day. You might have it right. I mean, I'll give you an example of something. I go back to when I said I picked 10 winners in a row. Remember, going way back. I can go back to 1995, and I use this as one of my examples. Back then, you didn't have internet. Well, internet was there, but it was really not there. So if I wanted to listen to a horse race, I listened on the radio, and I got a newspaper form of the horses. And I remember in this particular race, I'll tell you this quick story. I suppose we should pack it up soon, but um, this particular race, I looked at it, and the predominant planet to win this race was Mars. Okay, I go Mars is going to win, and I looked at these horses in the race, and there was only about 8 to 10 horses, and I went through each one, and I go by name. So, for example, the winner, if it's going to be a Mars ruled race, the horse is going to be associated to Mars. So, for example, names like if the horse is called Sword, that's a Mars object. There's nothing else associated. If it's Brave Warrior, someone who's brave is Mars, someone who's a warrior is Mars. So that's Mars and Mars together. But if it's Prince Henry, for example, a prince can be the sun,
Mercury.
whereas or Mercury, and then you've got what do you call it? Henry being a boy's name. I usually find male names are Mars. Okay, so therefore you've got a combination there. It's not Mars, and it's not purely Mars. Anyway, this particular race, there was these horses in it, and it was fairly early in the piece, and I went, wow, okay, this is the one that's going to win. I went through, and I think it was Prince something. This is when I was learning still, I reckon. And it was Prince, whatever the name was, and I went, oh, that'll win for sure. So I put money on that horse. I dropped in to see my mum on the way home. I was heading back, and I lived in Western Sydney at the time, and I was dropped in to see her in Cogra Way. And I said, Mum, I'm just going to have a listen to a horse race. And the horse race comes on. So I'm going to win some money. And I'd put $100 on for a win. $100. This is going way back to the 1990s. But I was confident, yeah, this is going to win. And then when the horse race starts, I hear this horse running called Karl Marx. And I went, am I listening to the right race? And I looked down, and the last horse on the form was a horse called Karl Marx. Karl, the boy's name. Mark, the boy's name. Mars and Mars.
Mm.
I went, my heart hit my throat, and I went, oh my God. How come I didn't see it? I physically even read over it 1,000 times, went to the TAB, put the bet on with money, and still could not remember seeing that horse in the race. It paid $124 for the win.
Mm.
My $100 would have won me $12,500.
Wow.
But I
Wow.
didn't see it.
It's
So
interesting because there could be different techniques you use to pick. Because in the Vedic system, every sound, every consonant has a nakshatra associated to it. So it gets real specific. So that
yeah,
would be something to
I agree. I was trying to keep it fairly simple. But
explore.
what I'm getting at, Molly, is why did I not see it? This is I was, because as soon as I heard the name running, I went, huh? Where's that horse? And
Yeah.
I knew as soon as I heard the name, that was what was going to win. And I looked down, I went, maybe when I read it, I didn't read it as Karl Marx. I read it as, Karl Marek or
Yeah.
whatever, or something. And I don't know to this
A
day
Mercury lapse, I mean, was
why
Mercury.
I didn't see it.
Yeah.
Why I didn't see it. Right. So the other thing that goes with things are signs. And can I leave you with one other little strange one?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And this is something really important too for people to consider, especially when it comes to luck. And that is sometimes life gives you signs. I'll use the example of the young guy that walked past Lydia at the poker machine and said, oh, that machine usually only goes up to about 600 and then no one gets past it. And if you pull it, usually they pull it out, they put money back in, it wins again. If he hadn't said that, she wouldn't have said, okay, let's put money in it. We wouldn't have won the 9,000. Now it gets better. Have a listen to this one. Last year's Melbourne Cup. I did a whole, I was in Queensland and I had to do the Breeders' Cup and the Melbourne Cup. I was in Queensland visiting my daughter because it was around the time, she was pregnant. She was pregnant, and I was going up to see her before my little granddaughter was born, Athena, and
Love the name.
Athena and Aries are her two kids. So and they weren't not my choice. They were just the way she wanted to do it. Both Greek gods, and so what happened was this: I had to do the podcast and I had to record it somewhere. And I knew for a fact there's no way I could record it in her little house with a screaming little toddler and a pregnant lady, and there's no way it was going to happen. So I actually booked to stay in a place nearby, and this beautiful place called Sheldon on a property. And it was like on 3 acres, and there was this beautiful place sitting at the back, and it was quiet, and I knew I could go there for a few days over the weekend, and do all the podcast work and then come back. And then on the Tuesday would be the Melbourne Cup. And the Breeders' Cup was going on the weekend. So I had Robert, I had Jennifer Ning, and we sat down, we did our predictions, and then we recorded it and put it all up there, and we said, yeah, this is what we're going to do. And we chose all of them. Now, this was not an easy pick time. It was not, the planets were not in an easy spot to pick a winner. And they were also in a situation where sometimes you get it wrong because you think one planet should have more influence over the others with a bunch of rules and regulations you apply, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes there's two ways it could go, for example. So if it went that way, it might be a Jupiter Mercury, but if it goes this way, it's Saturn Neptune or something like that. And you go, well, if I've first of all got to pick which planets are going to influence the winner and win it, and which ones aren't, and then rule those out, and then go after those, and then find the one that fits the description the best. Now, with the Melbourne Cup the year before, there was a horse that won called Without a Fight. And I sat down here in this house, and I was sitting there, and I got up on the Melbourne Cup day, and I looked through the whole thing, and I went through it, and I sat down and analysed the whole chart, and I went, it's a Saturn Neptune winning day, and the only horse that really fits that description is Without a Fight. In other words, to give up or surrender, and to lose is Saturn and Neptune, right? And it had done really well. It had won the Caulfield Cup, and I went, it's going to win. And sure enough, it did. I only paid $7 for win, but I backed it, and it won. So I picked that one, and then the following year, which was last year, we're in Sheldon, remember, in this lovely place, and we're doing this over the weekend. On the Saturday night, we were there. There was this huge party going on over the back. It was at acreage, and there was the acreage behind. These people were yahooing, having fun. They were celebrating like you have no idea. And we didn't go and join them. We thought about it. We thought, no, let them have their party. We're supposed to be in this quiet area, and these people are yahooing half the night. And it was great. So anyway, that was fine. And we were ready to leave on the Monday. Don't forget, the following day is the Melbourne Cup. So we're leaving on the Monday, and I went up to say goodbye to the owners. One's a Russian guy and a Canadian lady, and they'd bought this place and done it up. And I went up and said goodbye to her, and I said, look, I'm heading off. I said, oh, did you go and join the party on Saturday night? And she said, oh, no, because I'd seen them walk down the back. And she said, oh, no, they were just having a party. She said, they were celebrating because they got some horse in a race. And I went, oh. I said, do you know what the race is? I said, what, the Melbourne Cup? She goes, yeah, that's it. I said, do you know what the horse's name is? She goes, no, I can't remember. I said, do you know what's their surname? She goes, oh, I can't remember either. I went, okay. So I went back and I said to Lydia, I said, how's this? Here we are doing the podcast on the Melbourne Cup. But the people who were yahooing the other night are having a big party about they've got a horse in the Melbourne Cup. She goes, which one? I said, I don't know. So we left. And we went back to Jordan, my daughter's place, and we were there. And Lydia's going, and she's looking it up on the phone. She goes, look, there's only one horse that's owned by people in Queensland. I said, which one? She goes, it's called Knight's Choice. And that's, to me, Jupiter and Mercury. And I looked at it and I thought, and the only reason for the Jupiter and Mercury was because they were in mutual reception at the time. And they were also opposing the midheaven, and there's a few other bits going on. And I went, and the horse was 100 to 1. So I went, I'm not betting on it. He goes, no, I'm being told you've got to put some money on it. Like, what's the chance of us happen to be, park ourselves next to the people who've got this horse, right? Mm-hmm. And she's going on at me. And I went, no. And I didn't listen to her. She goes, I'm telling you, we're supposed to put $100 on it. And it paid like over $200 for winning the Melbourne Cup, and I didn't pick it. I didn't bet it. And once again, I could have won $20,000. And I didn't listen to the sign because it went against what my astrology that had won
Ah,
me the year before was telling me to do. Because it could go either way, and I chose one way over the other.
it's nice
And
when they both line up, the more
oh,
logical and then the intuitive.
well, that wouldn't have been the sign, which would have been probably my lesson in the choice. So
Exactly.
my lesson there was very obvious. Listen to the signs. That sometimes you can rationalize and work something out to the point where you get it wrong,
And you
but
over
we're giving you the option. So these are other things, and people go, "Oh, no, that's just a random." When I say signs, it might be you're thinking you're going to do something, and you jump in the car, and a random song comes on, and it's telling you the message you needed to hear. Listen to it because it's not put there. It's like think about if we're living in a matrix, they're just having fun.
the
They're
holographic
just pushing buttons.
reality.
Yeah, that's right.
And what
So
you're seeking in. Well done.
this is very interesting. But here we were going, oh Jesus. And if I listened to her, like I did with the poker machine, but I went, yeah, you do it then. I said, why didn't you force it? Force it. I mean, we could have put money on. I just went, no, because I'm not doing it. And I didn't listen to her. And look what happened.
There you go.
But the signs were there. And from previous stuff, you would go, yeah, silly me. And I still go, silly me. But look, there's a lesson in it. You only learn the lessons usually the hard way.
Hard way.
If
I
they
was
all,
just gonna
if
say
they
that
all fall in, they all fall
say
in your lap, you
success
learn the
comes on a
lesson.
pile of failures. So
Yes, exactly. So anyway, that's sort of where I'm at, and that's part of what I would say would be my influence on the astrology with luck and finding the timing. I would say anyone who wants to come and do my course I set up, I will do it with AstroCollege, the International Academy of Astrology. I haven't finished it yet. I do have to do a presentation similar to this for Lake County, I think Astrology Association. They're in Ohio,
okay.
but I'm going to be doing that online in September. And but I'm hoping to have this set up, and I'll maybe running it over, say, a 4 week period in a build up to the Breeders' Cup, Melbourne Cup, and hopefully whoever comes along, we can all work out who's going to win and go and make some money
That
together.
sounds fun. I look forward to it. And of
Yeah.
course, just a little disclaimer, we're not condoning betting or gambling or anything. Your free will,
No,
your
we're not condoning it. We're saying that it is all part of the fun. You
Mhm,
do need to learn that lesson of Kenny Rogers: know when to walk away, know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
mhm,
And if you take it as a view, I would only ever say to people, when I say I'm testing, like I did last night, I went up with a limit. I
mhm.
took myself a limit and I went, this is what I'm prepared to lose. Only walk into any place with what you're prepared to lose. Don't keep pushing the figure. And if I give you some advice and you take it and it starts to work for you, and I also say to you something like, but at this point you should walk away because this is when the things are changing. If you keep staying on doing it, blame yourself because
Oh,
I've been that person too in order to learn. But you don't want to do it if you, it's not fun when you're losing. So but it's also fun if you set yourself a bit of time, bit aside, and you go, well, I'm going to try this and see if this works.
awesome.
Um, yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Molly. It's
Thank you
great to
so
see
much.
you in Kauai. Yeah, here in Australia, it's like I think about 9 degrees outside, and it's sunny, but it's been pretty chilly and cold. So
It's a mirror world here. We're in the peak of summer, and I will link the website to Astro College below, and possibly
yeah,
that talk. If you can send that to me, and that's how people can find this course and offerings. And
awesome. Yeah, not a problem. All
appreciate
right.
the time.
Thanks very much, and you have a good day.
Signing off. Good evening.
All right.